moments in your story that most affect the reader and are most memorable will pretty much be caused by words you didn't write. Today, we're talking about paradoxes, because talking about 3 doxes would take way too much time. Today, we're looking at 3 very common writing paradoxes that you may want to keep in mind. If there are any paradoxes I missed, or if you have any thoughts on this video, please leave a comment below. So here we go. Paradox number 1, your best ideas will be conveyed by inference. This is not universally true, but I've noticed a lot of the times when a scene or a moment in a story really lands, it's often because of the reader coming to a realization rather than being directly told something. Which means that your best writing, the moments in your story that most affect the reader and are most memorable, will pretty much be caused by words you didn't write. Whether it's the protagonist realizing that their sidekick can't be trusted, or one half of a potential romantic pairing realizing what they've been looking for all along, or the detective finally figuring out the question that will break that scumbag suspect in interrogation, oftentimes these moments are not directly relayed to the reader. The reader reads and then realizes what's going on. Oh, they call him Zero because his last name is Zeroni, which is the same last name as the Latvian witch that Stanley's great-great-grandfather stole the pig from and then forgot to carry up the mountain. Also peaches and onions. Those kinds of events in stories are usually not directly told to the reader, but they're presented in such a way that the reader can realize they're happening. Like so many things in writing, this comes back to the whole show don't tell construct and evoking emotions in the reader rather than just directly relaying information to them. Paradox number 2, predictable stories are often better. If you were to explain the concept of fiction to an alien from the planet Memoir, they might be confused about a few things. Chief among them is the fact that fiction is often very predictable, and predictable stories tend to be more enjoyable than unpredictable ones. The best stories out there often follow familiar, established patterns. This is why we have things like plot structures and tropes and even genres themselves. Readers, as much as they may deny it, enjoy predictability to some degree. Elements like foreshadowing are crucial parts of good stories. The best endings are generally surprising, but a moment later things click and you suddenly realize that you should have expected this ending all along. You can't do that unless the story is predictable to a certain degree. Predictable does not mean simplistic, but simply that you could foretell the ending based on the hints and direction present throughout the story. If an ending comes completely out of left field, it usually doesn't work. If the leading man marries some lady he met in the second to last chapter, or the murder gets solved with a piece of evidence that the reader didn't know about, or the wizard defeats the dragon with a power that only existed 2 paragraphs before, every story is going to create expectations in the reader, and delivering on those expectations naturally makes a story predictable. If an ending goes completely against what the reader was expecting, it's much harder to pull off, and it's likely not to be a satisfying ending. Now, I can hear a lot of you yelling, "What about plot twists? What about plot twists?" Well, the best plot twists are not just random or completely unforeseen events. They are often hinted at, but in extremely subtle ways. I would argue that a good story that has a lot of twists is not inherently unpredictable, it's just less predictable than a less twisty story. A good story is not just a collection of random, exciting events. It is a patterned narrative that weaves together expectations and payoffs in a satisfying way, and predictability is a part of that. And finally, paradox number 3, restrictions and limitations often lead to more creative stories. Fiction is often an escape from reality, and the pesky thing about reality is all these damn limitations and restrictions. You only have so much money, so much time. Some of us are rapidly losing the hair on our heads, and despite all my effort, my telekinetic abilities are still quite lackluster. The real world is a veritable hodgepodge of physical, financial, temporal, and intellectual limitations. You'd think, given all the limitations of real life, that we would want to read about stories of abundance, about characters with unlimited resources, about supernatural beings with extreme powers. Why then are so many stories centered on limitations, flaws, and scarcity? While super rich characters and ultra powerful beings do occur quite often in fiction, the heroes and protagonists of stories are much more likely to be limited in some way. This is because good stories arise out of restrictions and limitations rather than abundance and power. Stories where every problem can be easily solved, resources are unlimited, and time is abundant are often boring. This is why Superman has kryptonite, why the Star Trek transporter malfunctions at least twice an episode, why the detectives are working in a department facing budget cuts, and why our heroic wizard can only use his powers on alternate Thursdays during daylight savings time. Part of this is because readers like to root for an underdog. Part of it has to do with the creativity that must be employed to get our protagonists out of these sticky situations. Humans have a natural negativity bias, so we pay more attention to problems and limitations, which means we are drawn to stories with flawed, constrained characters. Really, it comes down to conflict. Conflict is an essential ingredient in every story, and if there were no limitations, then solving the conflict would be too easy. Just like watching this video was easy, I hope. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the advice in it useful. Please remember to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any other of my writing advice related videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.